If he wins this, he would become the champion with 1 round to spare. e4, c5. We have the Sicilian on the board. Knight comes out to f3, d6 by Dubov. Will Magnus play the open Sicilian? Not really, against a maverick like Dubov. He prefers to be much more solid. Takes, bishop takes, queen takes. I'm a bit surprised by Dubov's choice because this is a very solid way to play as black. And maybe knight d7 earlier on move number 3 might have been a better way perhaps. But Dubov goes knight to c6. And now Magnus plays his pawn to d4. This is the Morozzi-bind structure that white has with pawns on e4 and c4. But there's a small difference here that the bishops have been traded. Now pawn to g6. He wants to fianchetto his bishop and put pressure on d4. Magnus brings the knight out. Bishop g7. And he defends the knight with bishop e3. Let's see what Daniil comes up with next. He brings his knight to f6. And now Magnus plays his pawn to h3. Interesting, sometimes you even play a pawn to f3, but Magnus prefers this, short castles. And now white also castles short here. Dubov has a harmonious development, but he lacks space. And now with b3, Magnus bolsters this structure and plays pawn to b6. Rook c1 played here by Magnus, just centralizing all his pieces. Dubov goes rook e8, and now rook comes to e1, queen b7. The speed at which Daniil is playing is quite amazing. He has 25 minutes and 40 seconds right now on the clock. He takes with the queen. And now Magnus plays his bishop to d4. He's being very, very solid here, not giving his opponent any chances. The knight comes back to d7 and he trades on g7. King takes, and now you can play your queen up to d2 and slowly try to see if you can launch an attack. But Magnus goes knight d5 immediately. He can be kicked away here with e6. But Dubov prefers to bring his knight to f6 and offering a trade. If you take here, maybe he'll take with the pawn. But Magnus goes queen d2, and now Dubov takes on d5. E takes d5, gaining space here in the position. The e7 pawn is weak. Queen comes back. This is not a pleasant position to play against Magnus Carlsen. He's just so good. He goes rook c3. He wants to double here, maybe even start pressing with h4, h5 and swing the rook over. Many plans, but Dubov unleashes. He goes e5. He's like, I don't want to be passively defending this position, but Magnus plays en passant. D takes e6, rook takes e6. Now the d6 pawn is a permanent weakness. Magnus takes the rook. You can take with the pawn, but then 2 pawns would be weakened. So Dubov correctly captures it back with the queen. And now rook to d3. You don't really want to be defending this passively with rook d8. Rook c6 might be a better choice, but Daniil anyway goes rook to d8. Magnus pushes h4. He's trying to create another front for his pieces. But Dubov stops the pawn advance with h5. Pawn to g3 played. Magnus is very patient here. He knows that Dubov does not enjoy such positions. He likes creative positions where there are chances. Here it's tough for him. And Magnus is enjoying himself. He goes king g2, calmly improving his position. Queen to e5. For now, there's nothing much that Dubov can do apart from waiting. Pawn push to a4. Magnus is just playing on all sides of the board. A check comes in. The king moves to the side. And now queen to f5. How is Magnus going to make progress is the big question here. He goes king g1. Just defending the f2 pawn. And now rook to e8 is played. I wonder where the rook wants to enter. Queen c3. Now notice, taking here would have been bad because of queen b1 followed by b3 hanging. So he goes queen c3 check, queen e5, and now chops off the queen. Pawn takes, preferable was rook takes, because after rook takes d6 you have rook e2 with good compensation, but he took with the pawn, and now Magnus enters the 7th rank, attacking the pawn on a7. Dubov in big trouble. Does he go defensive with rook a8? Instead he goes a5, but now the b6 pawn is weak. Rook d6 is a great move here. Let's see if Magnus finds that move. Rook d6. Yes, he does. Rook e6 would be a lost king and pawn endgame after takes. So he goes rook b8, and now it's time to bring your king into the game. Yes, king g2 is a fine move. Magnus is winning here. He's completely dominating in this endgame. But Dubov comes king f8. He wants to come king e7. So king f3, king e7, and rook d5 is the best way to continue. But Magnus goes rook d5 first, attacking this pawn. And Dubov goes rook e8. Now very important here, maybe going back, forcing the rook backwards. But Magnus goes king f3. The problem with this move is that now black can hold this position with rook e6, an important move to find for Daniil Dubov. Will he be able to find it? No, he goes, yes, he finds it. Ooh, that's a great move. Rook e6. Magnus goes rook b5, and now very important to play pawn to f6, because eventually in a king and pawn endgame you will have chances with g5. No, he goes f5. This is a big mistake, because now Magnus is winning. And the main point is that after c5, pawn takes, pawn here, rook, you can't go rook b6, as after rook b5 take, this king and pawn endgame is losing. If you had your pawn on f6, it would have been possible to hold this. That's how deep the point is. But anyway, Magnus pushes c5, takes, and now takes on a5. Dubov cannot go active with rook b6 because of rook b5. So he goes rook c6. He's a bit passive, but this helps Magnus now to simply bring his king up here. King d3, king c4. Okay, so king comes up to f7. He goes rook to b5. And now king e6 played. Magnus now deciding how to continue. He pushes his pawn to a5. If king d5 here, there is b4, which is very, very strong. So he goes king d6. But now king d3, king c4 is what Magnus can bring in. Yes, he brings his king to d3. It's amazing how these pawns here, although they are active, have left black with very less play. Magnus takes now, pawn takes. And king to c4. This is good play here. Just dominating the position slowly but surely. g5, Dubov trying for counterplay at all costs. And Magnus just calmly takes it. Yes, black has a passer here, but now the rook can simply swing over from behind, and that should be completely fine. That's exactly what Magnus does. Rook b8, fantastic. He goes king e5. But can we not just swing our rook over here? Yes, Magnus plays it. King to f5. And even though you are just one pawn up here, the position is losing for a simple reason that the white king and the a pawn are just too strong. You can see here, these two are very, very powerful. Rook goes to c3, pawn to f3. Last hope for Dubov is to get his king in and try to win this pawn. So king b5 is played, attacking the rook. Rook goes to f6. And now a6 is coming in. Yes, a6, pawn push. Dubov resigns, Magnus Carlsen wins. And with this, he not only wins the game, but also the tournament. The Tata Steel Chess India Rapid 2024 champion is Magnus Carlsen with a resounding score of 7 out of 8. 2 points ahead of the next.